Alrighty, welcome to Friday. It is the Chico Borman Show here on the Big Play Sports Network. And, many of you, I'm sure, not only getting ready for a big weekend, Browns weekend, taking on the Texans coming up on Sunday, but obviously finishing up that holiday shopping or cooking or baking or whatever the heck you may be doing. Hope everybody is well. And, of course, getting ready for the holidays and whatnot. I was just thinking about this today. So, a week from today, next Friday, the Browns may have clinched a playoff spot because they play the Jets on Thursday. So they play the Texans Sunday, then return home, and a short week, they play at home against the Jets Thursday. There's too many scenarios tomorrow or Sunday to talk about clinching, but Thursday could be realistic. Now, of course, you got to take care of business on Sunday. But by Friday, by this time next week, we could be talking about the Browns in the postseason, and Bohm will be getting ready for the Buckeyes in Missouri in the Cotton Bowl. I don't know how excited people are. I'm actually excited.
You sounded like Gulick when you said that.
What?
The Cotton Bowl.
The Cotton Bowl.
God's
This is God's country out here in Dallas. I mean, this is like unbelievable. just could not be a nicer day. All right, we've got a lot going on this Friday, as you can imagine. Coming up in just a bit, 12:10 to be exact, Dan Lobby. He is with Cleveland.com and the Cleveland Plain Dealer, getting set. The very latest from Berea as the Browns get set to take on the Texans. Looking more and more like it's going to be the battle of the backups, although I don't know. I'll ask Dan this, and I was going through it. I should probably just have done the research before the show. I don't think we've had a quarterback start 4 consecutive games. I mean, if that doesn't sum up the season. Bohm, have they? I don't think they have.
They definitely haven't. There's no way.
So Flacco gets the start. Case Keenum, our old buddy who knows Kevin Stefanski very well and vice versa, will be starting for the Houston Texans. This is a big one for the Texans as well. I mean, they're 8-6, just like the Browns are 8-6, and they're in that wild card hunt with
Browns are 9-5.
Or I'm sorry, like the Browns are 9-5. Excuse me. Browns are 9-5. Houston's 8-6, but the Texans are right in the wild card race too. Indianapolis, Cincinnati, I believe they're tied in the AFC South as well. Tiebreakers don't go their way, but yeah, that's twice. 2 days. I've said they're 8-6. What game am I forgetting that they played?
You know what, Chico? It's so weird being 9-5. It doesn't feel right.
Well, I wouldn't be forgetting a game. I'd just be giving them a loss. Shame on me. They're 9-5.
Get it right, damn it.
Texans are 8-6. Even Rapine was like, "What the hell, dude?" So anyway, we will talk to Dan Lobby coming up at 12:10. Get his thoughts, the injuries. Joe Flacco's calf, I don't think is really any big deal. Saw a video of him rolling out. He seems to be okay. But we will get the latest there. And coming up at 12:30, I can't wait to talk to this guy. Sean Pendergast is the co-host of Payne and Pendergast, morning 6 to 10 on 610, Sports Radio 610 in Houston. So we got 610 in Kansas City with Carrington and 610 in Houston with Pendergast. I like it. Anyway, the last time that I talked to Sean was, oh my gosh. Yeah, it would have been back in the Deshaun. He had just had Rusty Hardin. Remember Rusty Hardin when he made that stupid comment about, well, but he didn't have a happy ending or something like that, or guys, just something stupid. And it went viral. It was on Pendergast's show. But Sean, during the whole Deshaun Watson stuff, even beyond that, we would converse and go on each other's shows. And, man, now here the Texans are. I mean, nobody envisioned this. Nobody. Even in Houston. Like, I'm sure that they felt much better with DeMeco Ryans at the helm. And I've got to ask him about Jack Easterby. He'll get a good laugh at that. Jack Easterby was like the cancer in that Texans locker room, Texans front office, that finally he goes away and they start to do well. But we'll talk to Sean Pendergast coming up at the bottom of the hour. Texans are 8-6. C.J. Stroud is out in this game, as we said, still dealing with concussion symptoms. So not a good thing for him. And they desperately need him. I mean, the Texans, like we talk about this game being huge for the Browns. They're all big for the Browns. This is very, very big for the Texans, being right in the thick of things. So, yeah, getting ready for that. Cavaliers lost last night. Sam Merrill, what is this, man? We leave the show. We're hyping up Sam Merrill. We leave the show. I leave the show. I'm driving home, and I hear Sam Merrill has a wrist injury. Probably from too many follow-throughs the night before. Too many hand in the cookie jar moments. But Sam Merrill couldn't give it a go. The Cavs lost last night, and they will be on the road. They've got the Bulls, I think, coming up, the Mavericks coming up. But more injuries for the Cavaliers as well. Last night, Thursday Night Football, I'll tell you what, this Rams team, look out. Like, Matthew Stafford is playing about as well as you can play. I still don't believe in their defense, but Stafford is slinging it all around. Puka Nacua. Think about this for the Rams, right? 2 fifth-round draft choices are like leading the charge for the Rams. And then the contrast is you have a 40-year-old quarterback or thereabouts in did you sent the link to Pendergast, right? Boom. You sent it? Okay, good. Because he's trying to find that, so make sure you get that to him. All right, this guy did get the link, which is always a good thing. Dan Lobby, Cleveland Browns, covering the Cleveland Browns for Cleveland.com and the Plain Dealer. Browns getting set for the Houston Texans coming up this Sunday on the road, and he joins us now live from Berea. Dan, as always, thank you. What is the latest on the injury front? We heard and saw Joe Flacco's name pop up as far as the calf. Everybody these days, like, kind of breathes a huge sigh of relief. We hope he's okay. What's the latest on Flacco?
You know, he looked okay when we saw him in practice, and I think that was one of those cases where they were kind of just being cautious because they had a walkthrough on Wednesday. So it was an estimated injury report. So by the time he got back out on the field on Thursday, it was, a full participant. So I don't think there's anything to worry about there with Joe Flacco. He looked fine throwing in practice when we were able to see him. And I think he'll be out there on Sunday and should be pretty much 100% Joe Flacco. At least that's what I would expect.
So I just said this to start the show. He's going to be starting his 4th consecutive game. Have we had anybody start 4 consecutive games for the Browns this year, quarterback?
That's a good question. I don't know that we have, right? I mean, because Deshaun only made it 3. PJ Walker didn't start 4 in a row. I don't think we have. I think you might be onto something here.
I was just, and honestly, I wasn't trying to catch you off guard. I was sitting here as we started the show, and I said to my producer, Bohm, I'm like, wait a minute. This is Flacco's 4th consecutive start. I don't think we've had that. I mean, in this crazy year, and it just speaks again to, here's a guy, and Joe Flacco continues to, get more and more comfortable. Now, last week, I mean, Dan, this is what we've been talking about too. He's not perfect, but like through 3 quarters, it was a mess for the most part. 4th quarter, it's like he has that memory of a closer out in baseball, like you've got, or a shutdown corner. You better be able to put it away and flush it and get ready. And Joe Flacco did. I mean, the pass to Amari Cooper, Marquise Goodwin, and Njoku, it was like 3 quarters never happened for him in that 4th quarter last week.
Yeah, and like you said, it's not going to be perfect. We do have to remember this is a 38-year-old quarterback who wasn't even on a roster, Thanksgiving weekend. So, or the week before Thanksgiving. So it's not going to be perfect, and he is going to make mistakes. And he is a guy that has turned the ball over in his career. That happens, but he's also a guy that has won big games and played in big games. And when he has a game where he's thrown 3 interceptions, not all of which were his fault, but when he's thrown 3 interceptions, he can then turn around and make that throw to Amari Cooper, which is one of the best throws we've seen all season long. That's just a veteran quarterback, an unflappable guy who, when you need him to make a play, he's going to make a play. And that's really what's changed this Browns offense since he's taken over, is that ability to make that type of throw in that situation.
Is there a concern for the run game, or do we look at it and say, look, because I said earlier in the week, like I'm no longer looking at, how much are they running, how much are they passing? But okay, if you want to look at something and nitpick, they haven't run the ball that well. Bears were great against the run. Is it just a matter of game plan and Stefanski said, hey, you know what? They're strong against the run. We're going to air it out a little bit. Should we be concerned about the run game?
I think there's cause for a little bit of concern just because this offensive line is in such a state of flux. You don't have either of your starting tackles. And I think when Joel Bitonio is not out there, that changes your run game too, because then you just have Wyatt Teller. You also didn't have Ethan Posick in that game. And those interior guys are so important, but especially Joel to this run game. And that's really where it starts. So, it looks like Joel is going to be back this week. It looks like they might have Ethan Posick back this week too, but this run game isn't going to look like it used to just because you don't have your tackles. Your offensive line is a little bit weakened. But really, I think the way to look at it is it's not so much are you getting 4 yards a carry running the ball 18, 20 times a game. It's are you getting timely runs when you need them? Are you able to turn and hand the ball off and get a chunk play every now and then, or give the ball to Kareem Hunt and pick up a 3rd and 1 or a 4th and 1. I think it's more about timely runs right now than consistent running, because I just don't know if there's going to be that consistent run game. And Houston's a pretty good run defense too. So I don't know that it gets going this week either.
When we flip it to the other side of the ball, obviously the big story in Houston is C.J. Stroud still suffering from concussion-like symptoms. It's going to be old pal Case Keenum, very familiar with the Browns. Browns very familiar with him, and specifically Kevin Stefanski. What has kind of been the general attitude, and not so much attitude, but kind of the how they're going about the preparation for Case Keenum this week?
Well, I think the nice thing here is if anybody knows that Case Keenum can start a game and win it, it's this football team. They've seen him do it for them in the past. Of course, Kevin Stefanski was on the Minnesota staff when Case Keenum was the quarterback and they went to the NFC Championship game. So, you don't necessarily win because of Case Keenum, but he is a quarterback that can run your offense and help you win football games. So I don't think anyone in this building is going to take him lightly. I don't think anyone believes, I mean, look, this is obviously a huge step down from CJ Stroud, but I don't think anyone believes that the Texans can't win this game just because Case Keenum is starting. So I think they're going to take it seriously. I would expect them to anyway, but I think they understand what Case Keenum is capable of, and that they just need to go and do what this defense has done all year: create pressure, make plays in the secondary. And if we're being honest, they got to figure this thing out on the road, because some of their worst defensive performances this season have been on the road. So this would actually be a positive step if they can kind of turn it around against Keenum a little bit.
So I said to somebody yesterday, Myles Garrett on turf could be, a huge advantage. However, the officials, I hate to be that guy. I think we all hate to be that guy, Dan, where we're, the officials, but this is starting to get ridiculous. And I think it really, for Kevin Stefanski to say what he said and kind of go on the defensive as far as Myles and Defensive Player of the Year, that felt like something Kevin normally wouldn't do. And I think, everybody looking at sack numbers, which we're prone to do, he wanted to point out, look, this guy's still dominating a game, and, obviously the officials aren't exactly helping the cause either.
Yeah, I mean, this has been the Myles Garrett propaganda week around here. And listen, this is what their jobs are, right?
Yeah.
This is what Jim Schwartz and Kevin Stefanski should be doing today. Ben Bloom, the defensive line coach, spoke, and we just started the press conference by saying, all right, everybody else has made their case for Myles Garrett. Now it's your turn. And then he gave us like a 6-minute long answer about why Myles should be the Defensive Player of the Year. I don't love officiating talk. I don't love complaining about officials, but I understand the frustration. And I'm a little torn because, like, if you're getting held, it should be called. At the same time, if we want to make the basketball comparison, like with LeBron James, do we go to an NBA game to watch LeBron James shoot 30 free throws? No, nobody wants that. So there's got to be a balance between, okay, we're going to call holding, but we don't want to flag on every single play. But certainly there should be probably be some more flags thrown when Myles Garrett is getting, mugged on some of these pass rushes.
Yeah, I guess that's the thing. I mean, we all know that you can call holding on every play. We also know that trying to block Myles Garrett is just an unbelievable task. But some of these have been so egregious. Like, I mean, you're seeing him, his head going back, and it's just like, sooner or later they've got to make a call here or there. How much of this now, because you're asking for other guys to step up, and now you're depleted even more, as we talked about with the injuries. Are teams just basically saying, if they weren't already, well, Myles we're not going to allow him to even sniff the quarterback this week?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just been the strategy. Is like, we've got to shut down Myles Garrett, and it's a credit to Myles that he's still been getting to the quarterback. And I know he hasn't had, he had the sack on the 2-point try, which doesn't count as a sack in the stats, but he hasn't had a sack now in 4 weeks. He is still getting pressures. He made a great play in the run game last week, so he's still making some things happen. But they really do need, some other guys to maybe step up and give them some sack production. Now, Zadarius Smith, he's been great creating pressures, right? And that's something the Browns really value. That's something that a lot of people in the NFL value is pressures. But you do also want to see them hit the quarterback. And, and nothing is going to change an offensive coordinator more than seeing his quarterback get hit over and over and over again. And so, you'd like to see a little more sack production out of Zadarius. With Obo out, that obviously hurts them. You're counting on like Alex Wright, Isaiah McGuire. Those guys have been a little hit and miss, but I do think at the very least they've continued to create pressure, and they really value that statistic. So there's been that, but yeah, I mean, I think teams are basically saying we're going to do everything we can to make sure Myles doesn't get to our quarterback and hit him. Dan
Labbe joining us, Cleveland.com and Cleveland Plain Dealer. Browns getting set for the Texans on the road this Sunday. You mentioned Obo. Can you just kind of clear that up a little bit? Because I know they haven't put him on injured reserve. It sounds like something he's really battled through and tried to play, and he can't. Is there still an outside shot that his season might not be done? Where are we at with him?
I mean, at this point, I think he's kind of looking for any sliver of hope right now to basically say he can come back and play, whether that's during the regular season or in the playoffs. I think he's looking for I don't know if he's out there just looking for an opinion of someone to say, yes, you can play, and this is why. But I think he's just looking for that sliver of hope now, because he hasn't been practicing. So it's not like he's even been out on the practice field while we're going through all this. But I think they're just kind of giving him his time to do what he needs to do. And if they can get him back on the field, even with one arm, I think they would take it. But I think that's sort of where we're at in this holding pattern. He's just kind of looking for some way to make it so that he can play again. And I don't know if that would happen against the Jets or Bengals, but maybe it would happen in a divisional game or something like that.
So anytime you talk about the Browns defense, Dan, obviously it begins and ends with Myles Garrett, but there have been other guys that have taken it to another level, and a guy that you wrote about this week, because I thought some interesting comments from Jim Schwartz about Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, saying now it's time where maybe we can't afford to even have him off the field. We want him on the field as much as possible. The leap that he's taken, if you can talk about that and what Schwartz is referring to as far as just the need to have him on the field at all times.
Yeah, I think it's just been a steady growth from a guy who, I don't want to use the word gimmicky because I don't think that's the right word, but he's not your traditional linebacker, right? He's a guy that sort of he's almost like a running back at linebacker. He looks for seams, he goes and gets the football, and that's really been his strength. And I think the big steps in development this year are getting some of those traditional linebacker traits, right? He's gotten stronger. That was something that Jason Tarver, the linebackers coach, wanted him to do in the offseason. He seems to really fit in what Jim Schwartz wants his linebackers to do. And that really stood out to me yesterday when Schwartz said, now we've reached the point where JOK, we don't want to take him off the field. Like we want to have him in a position where he's on the field, even on third downs, on every play. And that's kind of like that traditional linebacker spot, which we've seen Anthony Walker do. Last week, it was Sione Takitaki with Walker out. And I think they'd ultimately like JOK to become that linebacker for them, especially because, if he's going to be on this roster long-term, his rookie contract, once that runs out, if you're going to pay him, you want him to be that every down linebacker. And so I think that's where they're heading. And we've seen his snap counts elevate a lot. He's been over 80% now in the last 4 weeks. And in the first 10 weeks of the season, he was over 80% one time. So we're seeing them start to make that progress with him.
It's interesting when we talk about the linebacking core, going back to the beginning of the year, I think a lot of us said, if there's a weak unit, in quotes here. It might be the linebackers. I mean, you're talking about a stellar defense. I think the linebacking unit, obviously headlined by JOK, I think the linebacking unit has been outstanding this year.
And I think that's because of the scheme. I think so much of when we look at this defense and the turnaround they've made is they've really brought in a scheme that fits all these guys. So in Jim Schwartz's system, one of the simplest ways to put it is these linebackers basically play special teams. Like they just go downhill, cover kicks. And that's really freed them up. And of course, it's helped a guy like JOK. But I think Anthony Walker is a really underrated guy. I think he was really good last year before he got hurt and his season ended. Taki was really good last year before his season-ending injury last year. Last year was the year where they went through a bunch of linebackers. So I think these linebackers have been good, and I think this scheme just really fits what they do. And Jim Schwartz isn't like hey, I need big-name linebackers. He just wants guys that can go and really clean up what the defensive line causes up front, and I think that's where these guys have really excelled.
Here in closing, one of the things that we continue to talk about is that atmosphere and the culture seemingly coming together week after week. There was, I think it was David Njoku. They have these all these little things that we talk about, we joke about now. The shirts, the mechanic shirts with their names on it, kind of a lunch pail mentality, and then the pickup trucks. That are given to a player that helps. Explain that to us, and every little thing seems to help with this club.
Yeah, right. And this is the fun stuff when you're winning. This is the stuff that you love when a team is winning. Now everybody wants to talk about this stuff. So the pickup trucks is something they give to players when they literally go and help pick up their teammates. Like in basketball, right? Sometimes basketball coach will say, "Go run and pick up your teammate when he's down." It's almost a race to pick the guy up. So that's what that is. Guys get these pickup trucks. They were actually bigger than I thought. I thought they would be like little micro machines or like Hot Wheels. David showed us one and it was huge. So these guys are getting these pickup trucks for helping teammates out and picking each other up. And, Jim Schwartz on the other side, he would give guys what he would call loafs. And that was if you didn't go celebrate with a teammate, or if you weren't, we see these guys dance around and celebrate all the time. And a big part of that is he wants the entire defense to be celebrating together. So if they didn't, they would get loafs early in the year. So this organization right now is really big on a lot of that. Just a lot of those little things, those things that help your teammates up, celebrate with your teammates. It's kind of building that culture. And obviously when you're winning, people just eat this stuff up. And I think it's really helped.
Well, if you're Greg Newsome, you're not going to be getting a loaf when you're moonwalk. He does love the dance. I mean, he definitely loves the dance, right, Dan?
Oh, he does. Even if the ball's, even if he wasn't involved in the play, he's going to go dance. So yeah, Greg Newsome, definitely. I don't think he ever got any of those loaves.
How are they dealing with you want to say the P word and the playoffs, and they're 9-5, but you're even hearing guys, Joel Bitonio among others, say, "Well, we just want to be 1-0." So they're taking that Stefanski mantra. But is it really something like we're not even really talking about or thinking about at this point?
I think the messaging has been good, but I mean, look, guys have social media. Guys know, they have the ESPN app. They have whatever they're seeing, where they're seeing the standings, seeing the scenarios. The Browns even tweeted out the scenarios this week. So, guys have seen them. But the reality is, with where the Browns are, it kind of is just as simple as go win the next game, right? Like they can just win their way into the playoffs, and there's still a chance they could win their way to the AFC North title. It's a long shot, but they could do that. So I think the good thing here is we can talk about scenarios and this has to happen and that has to happen. But if the Browns just win, they're in control of their own destiny. So I think that's really how they're looking at it. And so some of this 1-0 stuff every week is just, hey, if we go win, we're going to get in, and it doesn't matter what anybody else does.
All right. I know you got the Stefanski presser coming up here soon. In closing, you put up the 8 clinching scenarios. I mean, I always say, I can't even get through reading those because it's so complicated. God bless you for even putting it out there. We won't even get into it. All we'll say is just go win on Sunday and it'll take care of itself. But that had to be, that's a lot of work putting that stuff together.
It was. Well, thankfully the NFL puts that out. So that was just a copy and paste job, but I didn't have to look through them and put some context into it. And, but the reality of it is, every scenario involves the Browns winning. So it just starts with that. And look, if Buffalo loses and the Steelers lose on Saturday, then we can start talking about maybe how some of those playoff scenarios might play out. But if the Browns win, that's what they all start with. So that's the simple way to start it.
You can follow him on Twitter at Dan_Labbe. That's LABBE. Does a great job. He and Mary Kay and Ashley with Cleveland.com and the Plain Deal. Appreciate the time, bud. As always, we'll do it again next week. Thank you, man.
Yep. Thanks a lot.
All right. Dan Labbe joining us. Good stuff there. You just love he was talking about the pickup trucks, and he's right. I mean, when you're winning, those things, everything, it just, gets magnified and it looks even better, sounds even better. But it's just, they seem to have that right attitude. And I'm curious this week, Myles Garrett, are we going to, at what point do they even make that a point of emphasis? Or do they just kind of ignore it altogether? I mean, because like I said, Kevin Stefanski's been talking about it. Jim Schwartz has been talking about it. Myles talked about it. Got fined $25,000 for it. Interesting stuff, though, from Dan. All right, coming up in just a few minutes. Can't wait to talk to this guy. Sean Pendergast is with Sports Radio 610 in Houston. We're going to hook up with him. It's been an amazing year for the Texans. And, I mean, you go back to the preseason, and of course, we all love doing predictions and, talking about, who's gonna be number one as far as next year's draft. And I mean, the Texans were one of those teams that you put near the top. Lo and behold, here they are, 8-6, and lo and behold, here he is. He is Sean Pendergast, one of my favorites in the business. He's co-host along with Payne and Pendergast in the morning, 6 to 10 a.m. Sports Radio 610 in Houston. Sean, great to have you, buddy. How you been?
Chico, it's good to see you, man. How are you?
Doing well. It's been as you can imagine and you can relate to, it has been a roller coaster year. A lot has gone down here in Cleveland. Of course, you guys are all too familiar with Deshaun Watson and that whole scenario. But let me start with you guys being 8-6 because, I said it coming into the year and was just saying it when we were bringing you in. Nobody really saw this coming. Truth be told, did you guys even foresee a possibility of 8-6 at this point in the year?
I think we saw a best case scenario probably in training camp of a team that we might still be talking about playing relevant football this time of year. My litmus test for progress, Chico, coming into the year, especially coming off of the last 3 seasons. I mean, you got to keep in mind the Texans won 11 games combined the last 3 years. 2 years, 4-4-3. They won 3 games last year. My litmus test for success was if we got to the middle of December and they showed that grid on, in the games on Sundays, and it shows the 4 division winners in the one column, the 3 wild card teams in the middle column, and then in the hunt over here on the right-hand side, if the Texans were still in that in the hunt column, that would have been progress to me. And when I'm saying that, I'm talking about like the teams that are still like 6-8, right, but they mathematically have a chance. They are in that column technically right now in the hunt. They're not in the playoffs right now. They're the 8 seed, but they control their own destiny. They've got a schedule where, it doesn't have any killers on the schedule. The Browns are a very good football team, and the Colts have been a nice surprise too, but they're all winnable football games. So my expectation was 7-10, and I think I was among more optimistic people covering and rooting for the Texans. So yeah, this season in so many ways has been just a joy and a revelation for a lot of us here.
As you can imagine, here in Northeast Ohio, C.J. Stroud has a lot of fans, myself included, being a Buckeye. And we've been rooting for him. Now, certainly if he was starting this weekend, we'd have to clear that up. But he has just been an incredible surprise for you guys this year. Is it as simple as saying this Texans team at 8-6, it's really all about C.J. Stroud and him, I don't want to say coming out of nowhere, but as a rookie doing the things that he's done?
I think he's obviously, as players go, a big part of it, but I think D'Amico Ryans is right there with him, if not even exceeds that. And I'm sure we'll talk about D'Amico in this conversation. D'Amico Ryans has completely changed the building. That was a building that needed changing. I mean, I don't know how closely your audience followed things going on here in Houston, aside from Deshaun, the last couple of years, but it was a mess. There was a guy by the name of Jack Easterby who was running things, who was a former character coach for the Patriots and ran roughshod through every facet of the building. It was a really weird and depressing time over the last couple of years. It was beyond just the normal football dysfunction of a 3-14 or 4-13 football team. It was Sports Illustrated article kind of stuff. So D'Amico has come into the building and completely changed both the on-field and the behind-the-scenes around. So if I had to power rank like the reasons behind why there's been this flipping of the script for the Texans, I would put D'Amico 1. But when it comes to the roster and the game day and the play on the field, unquestionably C.J. Stroud, who has been, I think, beyond everybody's expectations as far as a rookie goes. I think the hope was, Chico, that what he's been this year is what he would be like 2 years from now.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like he's been at some point during the season, probably around that time where he had the comeback against Tampa Bay with 40 seconds left, where he took him the length of the field in 40 seconds to win that game. That was when the conversation stopped being about how good a rookie quarterback C.J. Stroud is to just where does he rank among quarterbacks? Forget about rookie quarterbacks. And I think he's a top 10 quarterback in the league when he's healthy. He's obviously not going to play this weekend. But the thing I think that's been most impressive, two non-physical traits with CJ that have been the most impressive things to me, because you could talk about his arm all day long, is the how quickly the roster, everybody on the team took to him. His leadership is very authentic, I think. And the veteran guys on the team love him. The rookies on the team love him. Like, people just really love CJ Stroud. And I think the second thing, which I love that this is something about CJ that has been so noticeable, because I thought that S2 test was just such a bunch of crap, is that he is a quick study. Like from watching him at Ohio State, I'm sure, like, it's rare he makes the same mistake a couple of times in a row. Like, he picks stuff up very, very quickly. And I think those to me are the two things that have impressed me the most about him.
I'm glad you mentioned, that test and kind of just that lead up to the draft process. Cause it's no secret, and it usually happens to one or two guys. He was getting just raked over the coals. And I don't want to say, like, I can't sit here and say, well, behind the scenes, I know, but CJ Stroud was really highly thought of. And you hear things, being in the media, you hear if somebody's not, what we think he is. I'm curious, as the draft got closer, were fans a little, like, did they view CJ honestly as like a consolation prize that, wow, Bryce Young is clearly the guy? How did they view CJ Stroud?
I think I'm not necessarily a consolation prize, but I think most of the fans, and I'll admit, I was somebody who wanted Bryce Young, so I was ecstatic the night that they got CJ in the draft. And I'll tell you, like, we have a draft party every year. The team does, the Texans do. And it's at a huge outdoor theater with, like an amphitheater that has 5,000 seats and then a whole bowl of grass that people sit on, like the big, they bring their blankets and they sit on the lawn. So there's a good 10,000 people out there, and there's a gigantic movie screen where they're playing the draft. The place popped huge when CJ got drafted. Make no mistake about it. The Texans fans were excited to get a quarterback. But I think if you were to poll Texan fans going into the draft process, and throughout the draft process probably too, Bryce Young probably would have won that poll. I don't know if it would have been a landslide like 80% to 20% or anything like that, but Bryce probably would have won. And I don't think people would have blinked at that at the time. Like, the night of the draft, people weren't going, what's Carolina thinking taking Bryce Young? Now, we could go on and on about Bryce and how that's all worked out for him in Carolina. But to answer your question, I don't think they were viewing CJ as like a consolation prize where you're like, oh, cool, I get a home version of the game instead of the $10,000. You know what I mean? But I do think more people wanted Bryce Young than wanted CJ. But man, we all here like took to him so quickly. You can just tell when you listen to him talk how invested he is, how authentic he is. So he flipped people pretty quickly here.
We're talking to Sean Pendergast. He's with Payne and Pendergast, Sports Radio 610 in Houston, morning 6 to 10. Also, you can catch him nationally on CBS Sports Radio. Does a great job covering the Texans.
Actually, no, it's Chico.
Whoa.
I don't do the national show anymore.
Oh, you don't?
I don't. I gave it up right after the draft this year. Yeah, I just don't want people going to CBS going, where the hell is this guy that Chico was telling me about? Yeah, I don't do the national show anymore. It was Sunday afternoons. I had to get my Sunday afternoons back. So after 7 years, I hung it up after the draft.
Yeah, you got married, didn't you, recently? So you got to have that time.
Years. Yeah. So the first couple of years of marriage, I'm basically working like at least 6, if not 7 days a week. And this is my second marriage. I got to make this one work. I can't afford to go to, I can't afford to go to the 3 handle. So, yeah, so no more national show, but, as long as I'm in promotion mode, I do a podcast with the great John McClain, the famous, football writer here.
Yep.
We do a football podcast, 3 episodes a week called Houtopia, Houtopia. So that's on everywhere you can get your podcast. So that's what occupies my time now. That and my show on 610 here in Houston.
I'll be honest with you. I did not know about Houtopia, and I like you, and I like McLean, so I'm definitely going to tune in for that.
Thank you, buddy.
All right, let me go back to, you mentioned D'Amico Ryans, and you're right. I mean, there's changing a culture, and of course, here in Cleveland, we know a thing or two about that, trying to change a culture, I should say. Take us inside D'Amico Ryans. Like, what's his style? How do you change that? I mean, certainly winning, I guess, is the easy answer, but what is D'Amico Ryans like to be around?
Okay, let me back up to when he was a player here, because that's, I mean, I don't know. I mean, like, I don't know how many people in your audience remember D'Amico Ryans, the player. He's still a young guy, but he's been out of playing since 2015. He came into the Texans in 2006. He was a second-round draft pick in a year where they had the first overall pick and drafted Mario Williams with the first overall pick in that draft. D'Amico Ryans was the one that won Defensive Rookie of the Year in the NFL that year. So they drafted him in the second round in a year where they had the first overall pick and took a defensive player. And D'Amico was the one who won Defensive Player of the Year. And it wasn't, obviously, when you win an award like that, a lot of it has to do with he had 8 jillion tackles and turnovers and this and that. I can tell you from a leadership standpoint, his nickname was Cap the second week he got here, I think, for captain. They called him Cap. And my co-host, Seth Payne, who played in the league for 10 years, and he was a defensive lineman on the Texans the first 5 years they were in existence. His last season in the league was D'Amico's rookie year in the league. And Seth is somebody who is admittedly, he admits, naturally inclined to – rookies have to earn their A with Seth. Let me put it that way. They start with an F and earn their A. And Seth will tell you that when he got in the huddle, D'Amico was almost immediately made the starting inside linebacker, like with the green decal calling the plays. Like he was the leader of the defense like the first week he got there. And Seth said he was in the huddle at the first training camp practice, and some of the vets are all looking at him like, yeah, all right, Rook, okay, whatever. And he said by about the 3rd or 4th snap, he's like, yes, sir, no, sir. Like that's the kind of aura D'Amico Ryans has. He's just got an amazing leadership aura, but he's not a hard ass. You know what I mean? Like he's got a great bedside manner about him. He's very even keeled, very even tempered. And I think behind the scenes, and you talk to people, like he's just a great communicator and a phenomenal teacher. He's one of the smartest people that you're ever going to meet. So he's like, he is so revered. He would still be revered here, even if he hadn't taken the head coaching job. That's how well respected he is in the building. And I'll tell you this, he was here for the first 6 years of his career. He ended up getting traded before the 2012 season to the Eagles. And if you talk to people in Philadelphia, they talk the same way about D'Amico there as we do here. And they didn't get the version on the field that we got of D'Amico. D'Amico had a couple injuries at that point, and that's why they traded him. There's a salary dump involved and whatnot. But they talk about him in Philadelphia the same way I'm talking about him now, because he's just got such an aura and a presence about him. And I think that's what I would say. Like he's not somebody who comes in. There is a rah-rah element to him when it's appropriate, but he seems to know exactly when it's appropriate to do it. If you ever watch him on the sidelines during a game, he's very, very stone-faced and even-tempered. But when things require, taking the volume up a notch, good or bad, he knows when to do it. So it was so surreal to get him here as the head coach, because we had been through such just carnage through the previous couple of years where everybody was just taking their shots at the Texans and how dysfunctional. Why would D'Amico Ryans ever take that job? Why would he ever? I know he played there, but why would he ever take that job? And as it turns out, like he wanted to come back here and rebuild the franchise that he associates himself with. And his wife's from here too. So there are geographical ties that brought them back to the city. He's been an A+, man. He's been incredible.
Okay, so you brought this guy's name up a little while ago, and I now just laughed. I mean, it's just Jack Easterby.
Yeah.
So I've actually people here know who Jack Easterby is in large part because, so the article comes out. I think it was an SI article. I think other ESPN may have done one too. And I mean, I was just absolutely floored. Like, who is this guy? He was a chaplain team. So I made a comment on Twitter. This is no lie. I made a comment on Twitter about, man, this is just weird. He DMs me. And this would go on. You know what he would. I still have it in my DMs where he would say, I know where you work. I have friends in that area. I can get you fired. I'm going, why does this guy give a damn? If he gives a damn what I think, then he had to be a big part of this whole carnage that you speak of. Who was this guy?
He was the reason for it. He got here in 2019. And he got hired in 2019, April of 2019. He shows up, and the narrative around him had been, we obviously knew what his jobs had been. He'd been a team chaplain basically for the Patriots. He'd been their character coach with New England, and so somewhere along the way he got an agent named Bob Lamont, who's the agent for a lot of coach front office type people, right? He's kind of, this Bob Lamont is sort of to front office people in the NFL, like what Drew Rosenhaus would be to players, like he's a big wheel in that world. So Easterby hired him as his agent, created a market for him where there were a lot of teams that wanted to bring him in because he probably pitched like how it's pretty easy to pitch, I guess, that you're the big wheel behind the culture of a team that's winning a bunch of Super Bowl rings. You know what I mean? He's part of the Patriots. So eventually the Texans bring him in. Within a couple of months, Brian Gaine, the GM, was fired. He had just gotten hired the year before. The GM is fired. If you remember, they went after Nick Caserio the first time and tampered, so they couldn't hire Nick Caserio. So that's when Easterby and Bill O'Brien became kind of a two-headed general manager, which was a nightmare. Like neither guy knew how to do the job, and they're signing big contracts, including Deshaun's. They're trading multiple first-round picks for Laramie Tunsil. Like they're trading DeAndre Hopkins. Like they're doing things like, oh my God, what is going on here? Like how can this be happening? And I'll tell you, Easterby ran roughshod behind the scenes, not just on the football operations side. Like there were people on the business side, media relations, everything. If he had his way, he would have taken over the whole building. And so it got really bad. The team on the field got to be terrible because of the damage that he and O'Brien had done to the roster. Behind the scenes, it was a miserable place to work. When it had won awards for years about being the best place to work in Houston, all of a sudden it was someone where everybody's looking behind their back and walking on eggshells. And so it got really, really bad. Ownership eventually woke up, thank God. And I think I think there were fortunately some people got into the building that opened everybody's eyes as to what this guy was all about. And I think you add in the fact too, Chico, that there was an element of where he was using religion to kind of forward his cause too, which always makes things very, very polarizing and very dicey and almost slimy in a way when you see how it eventually plays out, that this was really just a power play by a power hungry guy. But boy, when I hear your story there about the DMs, I mean, I got stories about texts. He had a dinner with a bunch of media members here before the 2021 season started, where he just basically, and I was there, I was one of the 12 media members he had at an Italian restaurant here in town, where he basically spent the whole dinner blaming Bill O'Brien for everything. Because O'Brien got fired 4 games into the 2020 season. Easterby didn't get fired. Easterby became the interim GM when O'Brien got fired.
From the team chaplain to interim GM.
Chico, there will be a 30 for 30 about this.
Has to be.
When you take the Easterby dynamic and you combine it with the Deshaun Watson legal situation,
yeah.
that was our lives here in Houston for basically about a 2.5-year period. So that day that they drafted CJ Stroud the day they hired DeMeco Ryans was the day that the clouds started to break. And then the night where they drafted CJ Stroud and then 5 minutes later traded up to get Will Anderson was one of the most remarkable 10 minutes I've ever experienced as a fan of a team, to be at that draft party that night where they draft CJ Stroud and you're celebrating and you're hugging and you're going crazy and you're keeping an eye on the big screen just to see who the Cardinals are taking next. And then you look up and that logo flips from Cardinals to Texans. And you're like, holy, whoa, buckle up. What's about to happen? So yeah, like I can't describe the Easterby dynamic without taking you all the way through where the clouds started to break. And, he finally got fired midway through the 2022 season. And thank God, I don't think D'Amico Ryans takes this job if Jack Easterby's still in the building. Honestly, I don't think he would.
Yeah, I just remember again that article, and even guys like J.J. Watt, where people were saying, even players are just like, yeah, we're not real, and this
Dude.
guy would be on the field like barking and coaching.
Yeah, dude.
He wasn't even a coach.
Chico, your story is incredible. I can't wait to tell Seth this story. But this is how bad Jack Easterby was. When Deshaun Watson first demanded a trade, now keep in mind, this is when Deshaun was still in the good graces of everybody here in Houston before all the lawsuits started flying and everything. This is in January of 2021. When Deshaun, his trade request first hit the wire, Andre Johnson took to Twitter to go after Jack Easterby. And I don't know if I can express in words how hard it is to make Andre Johnson outwardly, emotionally angry at somebody to the point where he goes on social media. He never tweets to begin with. So to get him to tweet and then to get him to angrily tweet, like the only person that's ever made Andre Johnson that outwardly angry was Cortland Finnegan. And Andre beat the snot out of him in the middle of the football field back in 2010. That's how bad Jack Easterby was. Like he got under Andre Johnson's skin to the point where Andre actually pulled out his phone and tweeted something. Like that's a huge litmus test here in Houston, I'll tell you.
Okay, in closing, I got to ask you about this. We're, Deshaun's hurt for the year, and I just, because as you can imagine, it's very polarizing to this day. I've said many times that if fans have issues with him, we just have to understand that that's their right. Was it always? I mean, was there a time when Deshaun Watson obviously was playing well, but was there a time when he was beloved there and that he was a good guy, and that did you see a shift? I mean, just kind of give us an idea behind the curtain.
The whole time, like to the point where we're in the first lawsuit when Tony Busby, the lawyer that was representing all the accusers, when he put that first post up on Instagram in the middle of March, we were all like, no, this is just somebody, like, this is a cash grab. Like, that's not Deshaun. Like Deshaun was. When he came in as a rookie and tore up the world, he was beloved. Then the next two seasons, where he was basically the reason why they were winning divisions. This not the sole reason, but without him, they were a bad football team. Like he was saving everybody's ass for 2 years, in management and coaching on the team, the offensive line. He was saving absolutely beloved. When he requested a trade in January. We did multiple Twitter polls about this. Massive majority of Texan fans on the side of Deshaun Watson when it came to him demanding a trade. Most Texan fans understood because, as I just outlined to you, it was a mess behind the scenes. I think most Texans probably wanted out of here, but Deshaun was the only one that was a good enough player to where you go in and request a trade and then, they figure it out. So I would say, yeah, he was beloved right up until the time the lawsuits started flying. And then it was, I think, probably a lot of confusion for a while. It's, okay, is this real? Like, then once it gets to like 10 or 11 or 15 or 20 women, you're like, okay, something's up.
Right.
And then it reached a point where, at times you could see, the lack of contrition that he seemed to have for it. The summer that he still had to spend a year on the team being inactive every week. How weird is that in 2021? That was the big question going into training camp, Chico, in 2021, the David Culley year. Oh God, the David Culley year. Is Deshaun actually going to be at practice? Because we knew he wasn't going to play. Like the only reason they hadn't traded him is because he's getting sued by all these people, or they would have traded him before the 2021 draft, So that was the big, and then when he showed up at training camp, like I remember the very first practice at training camp, we're all standing in the media area and we all have our eyes on the gateway that the players all come through to get to practice. And you could see who all the players were, except like eventually, like, okay, no Deshaun, I don't see Deshaun. Okay, there's this guy over here who's got a hoodie on with the hood up, and he's got a mask over his face. Like we had to look and just see by his gait and his body type, like, oh yeah, that's Deshaun, but he almost like tried to disguise himself or something. Like I mean, in July in Houston, he's got a heavy hoodie on and like a thing over his face. And we're like, oh yeah, I guess that's Deshaun. And then eventually after 3 or 4 days of that, he blew up at the media saying, man, why are you always all filming me? It's the same bleep every day, blah, blah, blah. And then eventually the Texans just told him to stay in the building. Don't come out to practice anymore. But dude, there was a practice early on at that training camp where they made Deshaun be a safety in one of the walkthroughs. Like they had him put on like the little beanie they put for the defensive players. And he's having to stand back there like being a safety in a drill. I'm like, this is the most surreal thing. This guy was in the Pro Bowl last year. Wow. And now he's out here yelling at the media and being a safety in walkthroughs. Like it was the craziest thing, dude.
Okay, I know you got to roll. So last thing, it was your show that Rusty Hardin, when he made the infamous
the ending.
Yeah, I was started the show and I'm like, I'm almost positive it was Pendergast's show.
Yeah, it was my show, and I still got a couple minutes. If we're going to talk Rusty Hardin, I definitely have a couple minutes.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, yeah, that was my show. I had worked on getting Rusty on the show. I know Rusty a little bit. I'd had him on my show in previous years when he was, representing Adrian Peterson or representing fill-in name of athlete here. He's the go-to for athletes that get in big trouble. So I'd been working on getting Rusty on for a long time. Finally came on. Finally was the appropriate time to bring him on. It was in early June. So Deshaun was a Cleveland Brown at that point, as I know you remember.
Yep.
So he'd been on the team for a couple of years, but the suspension had not yet been determined, and there's still a lot of balls up in the air as far as what things were going to look like going into the season. And what I remember about that interview is it was Rusty, and it was one of Rusty's associates. I think her name's Leah Graham. So there were two attorneys in the interview. Rusty did most of the talking.
Of course.
But I remember the line you're talking about where he started just out of nowhere going into like how happy endings are not a crime.
Yeah.
It wasn't a direct answer to any question. Like I went back and listened to it, and he was with us for 45. We went 45 straight minutes with him on the radio. Like my boss kept poking his head and going, don't stop. We'll figure out the breaks. Like keep going. And so Rusty just kept going. And I looked and I asked him a question at the 37-minute mark, and he went for 5 minutes and somehow found his way over to, look, I know a lot of the listeners in your audience have experienced a happy ending. That's not a crime. It's not a crime. And I'm looking at Seth and I'm going, I think we got what we need here, man. I think it was crazy. And it was funny. Like Rusty actually called me later that day. And he wasn't mad at me or anything. He's like, he was basically like, Sean, do you post those interviews anywhere? Like, do you?
No.
I said, do you mean like a podcast? Yeah, the podcast. And I said, we sure do, Rusty. He said, can you send me a link to the podcast? Because I know what I said. I stand by what I said, but I got to listen to what I said. Because he ended up having to put out a statement later that day.
Yeah.
Because I think the sense I got, Chico, this is just my own. Like the sense I got is the Browns were freaking out about it.
Oh yeah,
freaking out about it. Yeah, because there'd been no punishment handed down yet, and Rusty's over here talking about happy endings when Deshaun at that point had denied everything. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So that was on my show. That was quite a moment, man. That was something else.
I just remember thinking to myself, I was talking to you probably know him, Carrington Harrison out in Kansas City,
Yep.
And I was talking to him, and I just said, man, if that is not, and I'm sure Rusty's a good guy. I don't know him from Adam, but all I could think of is sometimes when you have that big of an ego, and obviously he's got to have an ego. You start talking and you just don't even think like, oh, well, that's no big deal. Like even when he talked to you later, he probably still didn't get the enormity of like, wow, I just really stepped in it, didn't I? Or
yeah, I think my sense that I got, Chico, was that everybody reaching out to him afterwards about it. Like the most surreal thing about it was that interview was in the 8 o'clock hour. Seth and I go from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. And the most surreal thing was we got done with that interview at about 8:45. And by 9:05 on the ticker on ESPN were the quotes from our interview. You know what I mean? Like Watson attorney, happy ending's not a crime. Like, I'm like, holy, that happened. That just happened on our show. Oh, wow. It was crazy. It was crazy. My theory on it, my theory on it was, I think there's validity to your theory about ego. My theory on it, honestly, was people don't realize because Rusty has so much energy. He's over 80 years old. He's like 81 years old. And he was talking for 45 minutes, which I'm sure he's used to doing in a courtroom, but like he's used to doing the questioning. You know what I mean? He's not used to being the one. So I thought it might have been one of those things where he just, started getting a little bit of interview fatigue maybe and just was getting a little loose. Seth and I have a tendency to make people feel probably pretty comfortable in interviews as well. So sometimes I think sometimes it happens on podcasts sometimes with athletes. I think they lose track of the fact that they're like when it's athletes interviewing athletes on podcasts, that seems to be where the most salacious stuff comes out because guys forget that like, no, this is going to go up on the internet. Like people are going to listen to this, and that maybe there was some of that going on. I just know I'm glad it happened. And I love Rusty, but I'm thrilled that it happened on our show. It was great for the show.
Oh, man. Sean Pendergast, again, with Payne and Pendergast, Sports Radio 610 in Houston. One more time, where do we find the pod with you and McLean?
Yeah, it's the Houtopia Football Podcast, Houtopia, one word, and you can get it, Odyssey app or Apple Pod, wherever you get your podcasts.
Okay.
You can get it there. We do 3 episodes a week, and we do previews of all the games, reviews of all the games. It's, just all kinds of good banter with John McLean, who is one of the most prominent football reporters and one of the greatest human beings that you'll ever meet.
Dude, nice Christmas sweater, by the way. Yeah, good. I can't tell you. I'm thinking of somebody I know right now, a good friend of mine, Kenny Kidd, who would absolutely. So many people would love to have that. Where'd you get that? Online?
I got it. It's one of those things. Oh, you know how Instagram is. The algorithm gets in the mix, and all of a sudden they start shooting things at you that they think you'll like.
Right.
And the algorithm knows me better than my wife knows me. You know what I mean? Like that's why I got to quit the national show so that I can get to know my wife as well as the Instagram algorithm knows me. But yeah, it popped up, and dude, that's the thing, Chico. Like when something pops up on Instagram, I don't know how you are, but like I'll buy it, and after I hit send with my money, then look and see who I bought it from. You know what I mean? Like I'm not even looking at the company. I'm like, oh yeah, I gotta have that sweater. Here's my credit card. Hit send. Boom, boom, boom. Like, okay, now who did I buy that from?
It's
like
someplace in Singapore, and it comes back, and you can't even read the return address. Yes, you're like, what did I just do?
Oh yeah, and then the shop app that I have shows like where it's shipping from. I'm like, I'm never gonna see this thing. Are you kidding me? So man, cream of the crop, Macho Man. Oh yeah,
dude. Yeah. I can't tell you. I know you got to run. I appreciate the time, man. This was outstanding, and we got to do this again. I appreciate your time. For sure.
Anytime, man. Anytime. Congrats on all your success, too, and keep kicking ass with your show, man.
All right. Thanks, Sean. Take care, buddy.
See you, Chico.
All right.
Take it easy. Enjoy the game.
Yeah, absolutely. How great was he? How great was Pendergast? The Jack Easterby, and people who know me, like if you listen to me back on when I was with the Fan, I this became a thing. Like this guy would, and I honest to God, I wasn't trying to troll him. Like when I read the article, so full disclosure, my nephew lives in Houston. He's a principal at a school in Houston. Went to Kent State, and they were hiring galore down there. So he goes down to Texas. So he had been there a few years. I think he had just gotten there when like the whole Easterby and the scandal. And he actually texted me and said, "You've got to read this." And I'm like, who the hell? I didn't know who Jack Easterby was. And I'm reading this and I'm going, team chaplain. And then like they've got him as team chaplain, and then they've got like shots of him on the field where he's like coaching up players. It's like, dude, you're not a coach. What is this guy doing? But then what was amazing about it was he went from like the team chaplain. You heard Sean kind of say it. Like he got this agent who represented a lot of coaches and front office types. So it was almost like Kramer in that Seinfeld episode where he shows up and they just assume, well, he's got to be an employee. So, and he's coming home and Jerry's like, well, this was 4-2. He's like, oh, I'm sorry. This is my busy time of year. Jerry's like, you don't even work there. Yeah, I know. Tell me about it. That was Easterby. It is to this day, and he's right, that will absolutely have to be a 30 for 30. Google this guy. But I would bring it up, and he started, JC Prepper was his handle. And so some people started saying, oh, that's Casario. I'm like, that's not Casario. I mean, because Casario's from this area, whatever. But this dude, honest to God, like it was nonstop. And like, I'll report you. I'll have your ass fired tomorrow. I'm like, I may be fired tomorrow, but it won't be because of you. And he was nonstop. Anyway, we will take a break. When we come back, we'll do a little pick six. We've got a lot of big games coming up this weekend, obviously. Also beginning tomorrow, by the way. We'll do that, and we'll continue on. Now I have to look for these messages. Now I have to scroll through, and we're talking years ago, but I've got to find some of these. Chico Borman Show, more to come right here on the Big Play Sports Network. Welcome back, Chico Borman Show, here on the Big Play Sports Network. Good to have you along. I can pretend like I have a life, and I just don't have time to do stupid things like search into my DMs from 3-4 years ago. But now I can't. I have to find these. I don't think I erased them, but Jack Easterby, I still remember twice a week during the season. I would get ready for the show, or maybe in the middle of a show, and I would tell whoever the producer was at the time, I'm like, he did it again. And they're like, who? And I'm like, Easterby. And so we'd have to have a little thing where we'd run through what his latest message was. But thanks to Sean Pendergast. If you missed that interview, you're going to want to catch that again on a replay somewhere on our website. You can also go to wherever you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify, any of that good stuff. All right. It is time on this Friday, and what a weekend we have in store. Holiday weekend, many of you, including us, off on Monday. But the Browns will be taking on the Houston Texans on the road. No C.J. Stroud. It will be Case Keenum, our old pal, and Joe Flacco, just as we drew it up at the beginning of the season. We'll be picking that game here in the end. But right now, it is time for a little Pick Six. All right, as always, Pick Six brought to you by our friends at Tipico. If you need bet credits for football season, the Big Play Network is presented by Tipico Sportsbook. The Tipico Sportsbook app has your traditional bets like the money line, spread, and point totals, but also lock-in player props. Check out our Big Play boosts every single week to back your favorite Cleveland teams and athletes with the best odds in Ohio. Get in the action, load up for football season using promo code BIGPLAY100. to get $100 in bet credits on us, plus a $30 dog pound bet. Bet with the Big Play crew all season long with Tipico Sportsbook. All right, as we begin here, 6 games, all NFL. We're going to start tomorrow. The Bengals, we talked to James Rapine yesterday from Cincinnati. Bengals 8-6, still hanging in there. Jake Browning, the magic of Jake Browning continues. Was the defense going to be okay? They just lost DJ Reader. They got to go on the road at 8-6 to take on the Steelers at 7-7. Doesn't it seem crazy that the Steelers are actually 500? I mean, considering what has gone down the last few weeks. Steelers are at home, obviously. They are giving 2.5 points. I mean, is it as easy as saying this, Bohm, that the Bengals have something to play for and the Steelers are an absolute soap opera? As much as I do like and respect Mike Tomlin, I mean, they're a horror show right now, and the Bengals are playing for the postseason. So give me the Bengals all day.
Yeah, no, it seems kind of like the wheels are coming off in Pittsburgh, and they're too far gone to at least salvage this season. And with Mason Rudolph making his first start of the year, his first start in 2 years, I don't have a lot of faith that the Steelers are going to be able to eke this one out in the battle of the backups, as Browning has really seemed to emerge as a guy who could potentially get like low-end starter money on it when he hits free agency.
Yeah, you are still banking on that Browning for starter campaign.
I'm waiting for that cut from good old Jake.
Yeah, you've been on that for a while. All right, so we both have the Bengals then.
What was the spread though?
2.5. Oh
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I it's one of those two where you also talk yourself out of it, like it's just too obvious. But I mean, again, Bengals have everything to play for. The Steelers, I mean, Mason freaking Rudolph. Yes, the guy that was involved with Myles Garrett way back when. Guy hasn't started a game in 2 years. That's who's starting for the Steelers on Sunday. Amazing. All right, we go to Atlanta. Speaking of coaches that are rumored to be on the hot seat, now Tomlin I think is ridiculous. Arthur Smith, on the other hand, Arthur Blank, owner, said we're going to take the next 3 games and we'll review. There's a lot of talk that, man, if he goes, who might be the next head coach? Would even Kirby Smart leave Georgia for the NFL? Falcons are favored by 2.5 points. They are 6-8. They play host to the Indianapolis Colts, and the Colts, much like the Bengals and the Houston Texans, are hanging around there at 8-6. Colts at Falcons. Falcons laying 2.5. Again, this one seems obvious, but I mean the Colts are not a juggernaut by any stretch of the imagination. I heard that Michael Pittman was banged up. But I thought I read today, actually last night, that he was going to be ready to play and he practiced. So if Pittman's healthy, I think I like the Colts anyway, but I'll take the Colts obviously getting the points on the road against the Falcons, who are obviously playing for Arthur Smith if they want to play for Arthur Smith. Who you got, Bone?
Yeah, so this one is interesting to me. And you talk about Arthur Smith. I think he's in a tough situation as well because, frankly, they haven't had a quarterback they could rely on this whole season, like Desmond Ridder and Taylor Heineke. I'm sorry, that doesn't move the dial for me. If I'm a Falcons fan, I don't put a lot.
You're not banking on any of them for starter money next year?
You know what? If Justin Fields is on the market, I feel like that's a match made in heaven.
That would, that has been discussed in those parts. Here's what I would say about Smith. Like, I think the guy, I kind of agree with you. Like, you can only do so much with what you have, and they don't have a quarterback. The one thing I don't understand, though, is Bijan Robinson's, like, how much I mean, why not use this guy more? I mean, I know you're trying to, you don't want to wear him out. I get all of that, but this is clearly your best player. And, I mean, they've got some good players. Drake London's a great, wide receiver. Kyle Pitts is a hell of a tight end. But Bijan Robinson is sometimes the best player in the entire field. And it's like he's been very, very hesitant to play him as much as, he should or seemingly would want to. But, all right, so we're both going Colts there. All right, Cowboys at Dolphins. We head down to South Beach. The Dallas Cowboys licking their wounds after getting their butts kicked last week by Buffalo. So they're motivated. But Cowboys, remember, on the road, an entirely different team. Cowboys traveling to Miami. They'll take on the Dolphins. Dolphins are laying 1 point. See, Dolphins are I don't believe in the Cowboys, and I don't believe in the Dolphins. Like, the Dolphins have a good record, but the Dolphins, the Dolphins, when it comes to teams above 500, they haven't done well at all this year. They've been a disaster. Boom, you go first. I have no idea who to pick in this one.
Yeah, you're totally right. This is a really difficult one to pick, Chico, because to your point, neither of these teams have really stood up to actual contenders and shown that they could hang with them, outside of one win for Miami over a team over 500. With all that said, I think as much as I would expect Cowboys bounce back game after such a just awful performance the week prior, I'm going to take Miami in this one to cover, and I think they're going to win it. That offense, I mean, when they're rolling, they are as high-powered as it gets, and I think on their home turf, you mentioned the Cowboys on the road as well. This might be the hardest game on this week's NFL slate for me to pick because I don't know what to make of either of these squads, Chico. But I am going to take Miami here.
I don't think there's any question. Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, Ravens 49ers, which again is on our slate here in a bit. Ravens 49ers is tough, but Dallas and Miami, you could tell me that Miami blows out Dallas. You could tell me Dallas blows out Miami, and it wouldn't surprise me. I'm going to go Dolphins, or I'm going to go Cowboys, only because I do think they are a much better team. I mean, they are very talented on both sides of the ball, even though they didn't even come close to showing it last week. I guess my question with Miami is, you say, well, okay, Tua, Tyreek, they're going to throw it around the yard a little, but how did Buffalo really beat Dallas? They beat them up front, and they ran the ball on them. Is Mike McDaniel going to want to do that? Will he stick to that? I'm going to say the Cowboys bounce back in a big way. I'm going to say the Cowboys getting a point, actually win by double digits. We'll say 10, maybe even 14.
That you mentioned that run game, though. Dolphins' run game has quietly been one of the most effective in the league. You look at Raheem Mostert. I mean, he has a crap load of touchdowns. He's racking them up, Chico.
Yeah, but if you look, he was hurt for a while, right? And then
a brief stint. A chain was hurt for a while.
A chain was hurt for a while. Again, they have a decent running game because that's Mike McDaniel. It's Kyle Shanahan. It's that whole system. But are they going to stick to it? Will they want to air it out with Tua? I still think the Cowboys are a better team on both sides of the ball. All right, we got Jags and Buccaneers. The Jaguars 8-6. Jaguars 8-6. Baker, player of the week last week. Perfect passer rating, 158.3. The Bake Show.
Only quarterback to outthrow Joe Flacco last week.
Thank you, Bone. Thank you. Could you have waited to say that until after I was? You just decide you're gonna? You don't say anything for days. Then all of a sudden, right in the middle of a sentence, you're like, "Only guy to throw Flacco." It's all right though, Bone. I like it. Buccaneers are laying 3 points. At home against the Jaguars. Jaguars, sorry. I'm going to go Buccaneers at home. And the 3 points, man, I know I'm doing this with every game, but it's because they are a tough one to gauge. I don't believe in the Jags. Like, the Jags are another team that is Trevor Lawrence, and I know he's been banged up, and I give him a lot of credit for playing through that stuff. Calvin Ridley is like, one week he looks like Jerry Rice. The next week it's like he can't catch a cold. They haven't Travis Etienne. I don't know what happened there. Give me the Bucs. I'm going to ride the Bake Show at home in Tampa. The Buccaneers go above 500 as Bake continues to try to light it up.
Yeah, this one is hard for me to pick as well, Chico, because I don't know what to make of Trevor Lawrence. It feels like ever since he had that ankle injury where he got rolled up on pretty badly, and it looked like he was going to be out for the season at the time that it happened. But it looks like he hasn't been the same quarterback. And I still think, obviously, that he can return to form. I don't expect him to never be the same Trevor Lawrence again. But is it going to happen this season? And that remains to be seen for me. I am going to ride with the Bake Show, Chico. I love to see it. Honestly, I love to see him finding some success in the league and carving out a little bit of a little something.
Were you Were you somebody who, I wouldn't say, because again, I don't like to say like, oh, the Baker. Were you somebody that at least gave Baker the benefit of the doubt?
I think I could empathize with this situation. Oh, so you're saying like
I'm saying in the years where a lot of people were crushing him, and if you said anything positive about him, it was like, oh, you're a Baker, bro. I just didn't think he was as horrible as people made him out to be.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about it before. It's just the inconsistency. Because when Baker is playing well, he can play just as good as anyone. I mean, we've seen him lead out like go-ahead drives late in games. He can be clutch. He can make all the big boy throws. But he doesn't do it all the time. And I do believe in Baker, but I don't know if I believe that he could actually be like consistently a top 10 quarterback in this league.
So who did you pick in this one?
Oh, good question. Yeah, I am riding with the Buccaneers.
Thanks, Bohm. Bohm says all of that to say nothing as far as his selection. All right, pick six brought to you by Tipico. The next one, this is easily, I think, well, I shouldn't say easily. Cowboys-Dolphins is going to be a big one. I'm looking forward to the Bills and the Chargers. Even though the Chargers stink right now and it looks like Keenan Allen's out, like, will Buffalo pucker or will Buffalo, because it's like a 12.5-point spread. I almost thought about putting this one in here. Will the Bills win huge?
Pick 7.
Yeah, I've got to believe that they will. But anyway, the game that you really want to see, other than our Browns taking on the Texans, the Ravens and the 49ers. Battle of 11-3. 49ers are laying 5.5. They are at home. I mean, the Ravens are the second best team in football. The question is, how far is the drop-off between number one, which of course is San Francisco, and number 2, the Baltimore Ravens? This may give us a glimpse. I just think the Niners right now, both sides, but offensively, like Purdy is, I mean, he's hitting everything. What did I see last week about Shanahan in terms of pre-snap motion? And like they're humming at a whole nother level. Debo's healthy. You've got Ayuk. You've got George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey. I mean, they're dominating. I think the Ravens are a very good football team, but I don't think they're in the Niners class, and I don't think they're in the Niners class on the road. So 5.5 is still a lot of points, considering that the Ravens are 11-3. But to me, this is a 7-10 point game. I think the Niners win fairly convincingly, not going away, but fairly convincingly.
See, that's interesting, Chico. I would pick Baltimore to cover. Now, I expect the Niners to win this one, but I anticipate that this is going to be a fairly close matchup. And it really ultimately depends on like which Lamar are you going to see, how well is that defense
he's
going to be
playing
able to...
well too, though.
Yeah, he has. And I think back to like the first time the Ravens went up against the Browns, Lamar literally hit every single big throw. Like he was as close to perfection as perfection gets in terms of throwing the ball around the yard.
You're all about the hyperbole this week, aren't you?
No, seriously, Chico, like this was peak Lamar hitting on all cylinders, but he's not like that every week. He misses a lot of big throws on some weeks. And I think after it seemed like he got a little rattled and took a shot against the Browns the second time, he was missing some throws. So are they going to be able to rattle Lamar here in San Francisco? And yeah, I'm going to take Baltimore to cover, but I think the Niners actually end up winning.
Okay. All right. And then our final game. By the way, could that be, this is interesting, could that game decide the MVP?
Does it separate McCaffrey from Purdy, too? Because I feel like there's still people out there who think that it's Purdy that's the front runner out of the Niners.
Purdy is the front runner because he's the quarterback. I mean, that's if you look at the odds makers, if you look at Vegas, it's Purdy and Jackson, and it should be. I wonder, like, if McCaffrey rushes for like 180 yards, because I don't want to discount what Purdy's doing. He's playing very, very well, but I think if there's a year that you could maybe look somewhere else for MVP, this might be it. And Christian McCaffrey's never won one. Now, I know that shouldn't, factor into it, much like, they didn't want to give Jokic 3 in a row, so God forbid we get, like, sometimes if they deserve it, they deserve it. Now, if Purdy goes out and lights them up and has a great game, okay, he gets it. Something tells me, because it is such a quarterback-driven award, something tells me that this is going to be, if Lamar and the Ravens win and he looks good, he gets the MVP. If it's Brock Purdy and he's leading the charge for San Francisco, Purdy's going to be your most valuable player. But it'll be a great game. I think that's Christmas night, too. All right, finally, here we go. The Browns on the road taking on the Houston Texans. The quarterback, way back, we thought, wow, you look at Week 16, will the Browns be in the playoff hunt? Deshaun Watson going home to Houston. That crowd's going to be we're just getting word that Joe Flacco will be the starting quarterback for the Browns against the Houston Texans, making his 4th consecutive start. No quarterback has started 4 consecutive games this year for the Browns. Flacco is the guy. Taking on Case Keenum. No C.J. Stroud. You heard Sean Pendergast say it as well. C.J. is going to miss this week, 2nd consecutive week with concussion-like symptoms. Case Keenum's a good football player. Case Keenum's not a difference maker. He can hold it down, but he's not going to – I don't think he's going to do anything crazy. The other thing, too, is I think in that dome and on that surface, I think Joe Flacco might be able to air it out a little bit. Now, again, Houston's defense, you heard Dan Lobby say it, Houston's defense is no pushover. But I think Flacco's going to continue to make some play. I think Marquise Goodwin could get behind the defense. I think you're going to see continued success with David Njoku, who just seems to be on an absolute tear. And that connection is there. Amari Cooper. So, yeah, give me the Browns. I'm going to say they win by a touchdown. I mean, 3 I think is a good line, but I'll say the Browns win. Final score, I'm going to go Browns 26 and Texans 22.
You sound like Cam Newton over there, Chico. He's not a difference maker. He's just a game manager.
Who's the game? No, I just
Case
said
Keenum. No, I'm just kidding. Because I don't know if you remember those.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's basically what he said about some other quarterbacks, a la Dak Prescott and whatnot. But whatever.
Yes.
Okay. Anyways, if C.J. Stroud were playing in this game, I would be very tempted to pick the Texans. Obviously,
you will be wearing C.J.'s jersey during this game, right?
Well, I'm going to be working the game, and I have my. I don't know if I want to say this and put the kibosh on it, but I have my lucky brown sweatshirt that I got for Hanukkah that I'm knocking on wood for. That the Browns are 2-0 since I've started wearing on Sundays.
It's time for Hanukkah.
Yeah, but another fascinating stat that I saw regarding Joe Flacco. Did you know that he is as far as active quarterbacks in the NFL go, he has the most road playoff wins of any of them, more so, including like Aaron Rodgers. Flacco on the road is something that I think, because we've seen how this team struggles on the road, and so this is going to be an interesting litmus test for him. Now, I expect him to step up, and I don't think that it's going to get to him, obviously, but I am going to take the Browns in this one. We touched on it earlier in the week. This feels kind of like a must-win because you can't lose to Case Keenum. You should not lose when you're in the thick of the playoff hunt.
Oh, yeah.
You got to come away with the W. I'm going to take the Browns on the road here, Chico.
Both teams in a must-win situation. Yeah, the Browns, they can't. I mean, put it this way. You're in the driver's seat. We love the fact that they control their own destiny. And if they win this week and they beat the Jets, and I'm not getting ahead, but by next Friday at this time, we could be talking about the Browns clinching a playoff spot. However, if they don't win Sunday, forget about that. They've got to take care of business. I think they will take care of business. That stat doesn't surprise me with Flacco, because if you go back to that Super Bowl run, I mean, he was incredible. That, like, in that playoff run, I don't think he threw a pick. So yeah, and you're talking about some Ravens teams. It's kind of like those Steelers teams with Roethlisberger, right? They were always winning. They were always going deep in the playoffs. Just amazing that Flacco still has this magic, and he's still, getting it done. And it's been fun to watch. I think it continues this week. I think the Browns defense, I'm curious to see, like, Miles, and does he get a few more calls? I mean, I don't know. When officials get together, I don't think they're going, hey, did you hear Miles and Kevin Stefanski and Jim Schwartz? They were all bitching about the holds, and we've got to – but at the same time, it is getting ridiculous. I mean, these are egregious holding calls that if you're a player, like I said, if you're not going to call them and they're not going to call them, I mean, of course they're going to keep doing it, because it's really the only way. Certainly if you're one-on-one with this guy, it's like the only way you can slow him down. So they're going to keep doing it. Yes, Bo.
Yeah, I feel like if you're any team opposing the Browns in the coming weeks, like, you're telling your players, hey, look what they're doing to him. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Don't be afraid to hold them. They're not calling it. Like, I almost feel like if I'm a coach, I'd be encouraging it, because it's just so blatant and it's so obvious that they're getting away with it. It kind of really does suck, but I also see from the other point of, you can't throw a flag every single play.
Boom. You know how sometimes I'll look over at you and you're laughing and you're thinking about something, and God only knows what. So as soon as you said, if I was a coach, immediately my mind went to Bohm in a pair of those bike coaches shorts, a T-shirt with the words coach, a whistle around his neck, and a hat. And I can't stop laughing. Like, Bohm is a coach.
Yeah, we might have to make that like a skit here. Coach Bohm.
Wow. Or maybe not.
It could be a good TikTok, some good content.
Yeah, that could be. It could be. All right, that is Pick 6, brought to you by our friends at Tipico. If you need bet credits for football season, the Big Play Network is presented by Tipico Sportsbook. The Tipico Sportsbook app has your traditional bets like the money line, spread, and point totals, but also lock-in player props. Check out our Big Play boosts every single week to back your favorite Cleveland teams and athletes with the best odds in Ohio. Get in the action, load up for football season using promo code BIGPLAY100. Bet $100, Big Play 100. Bet $100, and you get $100 credits on us plus a $30 dog pound bet. Bet with the Big Play crew all season long with Tipico Sportsbook. All right, we're going to hear some last-minute sound from the Browns getting ready for Sunday. We'll hear from Coach Stefanski, also from quarterback Joe Flacco, and a couple other news and nuggets to get to, including Florida State, which, okay, I know what the story is, but I'm trying to put together the pieces as to how this is logistically possible. But we'll talk about that. Final half hour on the way on this Friday before Christmas, the Chico Borman Show here on the Big Play Sports Network. All righty, welcome back. Chico Borman Show, final 25 minutes or so here on this Friday. Hope everyone is doing well. Many of you maybe took a half day or maybe a full day, and you're preparing for the holidays. Maybe you're traveling. Whatever you're doing, be safe. We hope you're well, and, of course, make it back safely because we got a lot of celebrating, hopefully, on the horizon for our Cleveland Browns. Browns and Texans coming up this Sunday. We will be off on Monday, but Tuesday – there is no rest for the weary. Myself, Nick Shook, the bold, bald breakdown. We got to add Pendergast. Pendergast is included in the Bald Brotherhood, where whenever he would like to make a guest appearance. I was going to mention that when we had him on, that it's nice to add somebody to the Bald Brotherhood. But love the sweater too. If that's not Kenny Kidd, that's exactly who I was thinking was Kidd. With that Randy the Macho Man sweater that Pendergast had.
Yeah, that Macho Man impression was pretty on point, too. I enjoyed that.
Oh, yeah. I can't do him. I can't do him.
That was bad.
When did he pass away? 4 or 5? What's amazing to me, I always tell people, he was in the Cardinals minor league organization. He was a minor league baseball. Randy Poffo. Poffo.
Passed away back in 2011, Chico.
God, was it that? I thought it was only like 6 or 7 years ago. Wow. Yeah, Randy Macho Man Savage was Randy Poffo in the Cardinals organization. Blows my mind every time. All right. So, before we get to Kevin Stefanski and Joe Flacco, some comments that they made this week in ahead of Sunday's game against the Texans. So this Florida State whole situation with they're going to sue the ACC to leave the ACC. First of all, why are they mad at the ACC? Like it's not the ACC's fault.
Feels like they're just a scapegoat, Chico. I don't totally comprehend what the big fuss is specifically with the ACC.
Yeah, I mean, they want out. I mean, they want out because they know that, well, the ACC isn't as strong as I understand that. If you're the ACC, you're going to say, well, wait a minute, dude. I mean, you got a contract here through like 2036. It says the Florida State Board of Trustees voted unanimously today to sue the ACC to challenge the legality of the league's grant of rights and its $130 million withdrawal fee. First of all, Florida State can probably afford that. I mean, I don't want to make it out like $130 million is $130 million. But like if that were Texas A&M, they would sneeze at it. I know A&M has, their endowment and how much money they have is about as big as anyone in the country. But Florida State, you mean to tell me there's not enough boosters that can get together and work something out there to make that happen? A 38-page lawsuit seeks a declaratory judgment against the ACC, against the ACC to void the grant of rights and withdrawal fee as unreasonable restraints of trade in the state of Florida and not enforceable in their entirety against Florida State, whatever the hell that means. Now, does Florida State play Georgia?
I'm curious to hear EK's legal insight here because I feel like there's not a whole lot in terms of what the ACC is doing wrong that would warrant, like, okay, yeah, we agree with you. You can opt out scot-free.
This is where, EK would be like, yeah, hey, sorry, see this contract? See this? Your name right here, see that? He'd be yelling into the camera like I was Florida State. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, here's what I want to know, though, because Florida State, Georgia is a game that I definitely want to watch. Is Florida State, is that part of their boycott? Like, are they going to play in this game? I mean, like I said, I haven't heard anything, but if they're already suing the conference trying to leave, why would they want to represent the ACC in a bowl game against Georgia? You know what I mean?
It's a great point.
I don't know if they're going to play,
especially with the backup quarterback. I don't.
Yeah, I don't know if the quarterback thing has anything to do with it, but no, I know what you're saying. Yeah, they don't have Travis, but I'm trying to think of if you're going to go to this extent, and you're suing anybody and everybody, I can't imagine they're like dutifully preparing for Georgia in a bowl game. Just doesn't sound like that's possible.
It's quite the distraction, I'll say that much.
It is quite the distraction, Boom. It is. By the way, Buckeyes next week against Missouri. I'm actually, believe it or not, I know people will say, I'm not even going to watch. They couldn't beat Michigan. They're not in the playoff. I don't care. I don't even want to watch them. No, I'm not going to do that. As a matter of fact, I'm actually somewhat excited because I want to see, what does Devin Brown do? This guy, I love his attitude. Instead of kind of pouting like Kyle McCord. By the way, that was a good shot of Kyle McCord on Syracuse's sideline in that debacle against South Florida last night.
Poor guy.
I blame his dad. More I hear, his pops was all about this is my parents. Don't do that. Don't do that. But I'm looking forward to the Cotton Bowl next Friday. I'll be on the horn with our buddy Eric at home. We'll have to get him on next Friday. But Devin Brown, I want to see what he can do. How many of these kids are actually going to play that are saying they're practicing, and are they going to risk injury? Maserati Mav, he's not going to play. I can't buy that.
Honestly, though, if he did play, would you be shocked?
Yes. I mean, I'd be pleasantly surprised, but I would.
By all indications, he really wants to play in this game. Now, I understand why you don't and
Boom,
why you
I know
shouldn't.
his sentiment. I don't doubt. Listen, Boom. I don't doubt for a second because Marvin Harrison's Marvin Harrison. He's a good kid. He was raised right. He loves his teammates. None of that is. I'm not questioning that. He's not some punk kid who just hell with this. Where's my money? But at the same time, there's going to be enough people, and maybe even his dad, in his ear going, son, there is a distinct possibility that you could be the number 1 overall pick, if not top 3. Of course he's going to ask his dad, and while his dad's going to be like, oh, you play for the team, he also knows his son is on the brink of being a multi-millionaire. Well, what about NIL? Yeah, okay, I get it, but no. So I don't doubt for a second, Bohm, that he does want to play, that he cries when he hears Carmen, Ohio, like you do, and I may have at times.
Depends on when they play it.
Yes. But I don't think he's going to play in this game. Some of the other guys, yes. Not him. All right, so the Browns getting ready for the Houston Texans. One of the things that I think we've been able to marvel at, we talked about it with Dan Lobby earlier, Joe Flacco through 3 quarters last week really hadn't done much of anything. I mean, and not that the interceptions were all his fault, but hadn't been typical Joe Flacco, but then all of a sudden he just kind of, put it on the back burner. Last 3 quarters didn't happen. Let's go. And, of course, he was on fire. Here's Kevin Stefanski, Browns head coach Kevin Stefanski, talking about Flacco's ability to make the plays when they need him.
So the quarterbacks, you have to clear your vision. You have to be very, very clear about what you see when you make those throws. Joe's got great height, so that helps him see it in the first place. But even then, there are times in the pocket where he doesn't have great vision and you have to slide and move. You have a lot of reps under your belt. You have a lot of turns at some of these things, and you know where you can get into trouble. But when you can clear your vision and be confident in what you see, then you can pull the trigger.
Yeah, I mean, it helps that he's 6'6", but he was getting into, and I'm sorry, I thought it was another quote. That's my bad. But he also was getting into the play action and the rollouts. I think we just assumed that Joe Flacco was in a wheelchair and couldn't move. I mean, I don't think he's going to be taken off on quarterback draws or anything, but the guy can still move. We mentioned the play action. I mean, he sells that as well as anybody I've seen. Yeah, he can move just fine, and it is the little things. I mean, it really, Tom Brady was never mobile, but Tom Brady sliding around in the pocket, stepping up in the pocket, and again, the feel. Remember Joe Flacco in that first game back? It was I said, he was he had eyes in the back of his head, It's like that timer that great quarterbacks have. He still has it. He'll always have it. Anyway, speaking of Joe Flacco, the guy, much like we were talking about last week, 3 quarters, all of a sudden fourth quarter rolls around. All right, time to stay focused. If ever there's a time to stay focused amidst 9-5 and playoff talk, it's right now. Here's the veteran Joe Flacco talking about just that.
Look around and just the way Kevin's scheduling everything out, and then the way you can tell that guys are focused on just today. I think that's what you do. You know what's ahead, and we know what's kind of promised to us, and then we know what's out there, obviously. We're not blind to all that, but it is about staying in the moment week to week, and you can tell when you walk around the locker room that guys have a singular focus.
Yeah, I think as we touched on earlier, like we live in a day and age where guys, everybody has social media and they're checking their phones. And so, I mean, they know that they're 9-5. They know that there are different scenarios to clinch. I don't think they give a damn about those, but they know that their hard work. Look, anybody who works their ass off wants to see a light at the end of a tunnel. I don't care what occupation you have. So if you're a Browns player and you've gone through this far in this season, you've gone through all of the injuries. You're probably banged up yourself. Hell yeah, you know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, which might be in the playoffs. But you also know with good leadership, that's important, with good leadership, that you can't start getting ahead of yourself. And, you hear these quotes all the time. I mean, everybody says them. There's no coach in the league that's like, yeah, we were just hanging out last night at the facility talking about how great it's going to be in the postseason. You'll never hear a coach say that. But I think, Stefanski, when he talks about 1-0, and we kind of joke when Joe Bitonio said, we're just trying to get to 1-0, and he even laughed. He's like, see? Yeah, he's wearing off on me. They all have that same mentality, and it's not just the coach. You have great leadership in that locker room, and here's a guy in 38-year-old Flacco that comes in off the street, and he may as well have been there for 3 or 4 years. The way that they have not only accepted him, but I think look up to him, and you're following certain guys. You're following the lead of certain guys in terms of how you prepare, in terms of what you're talking about, what you're when you have fun, when you're not having fun, when you're in that building and you're preparing, everybody's all business. And this is, again, a team with a head coach that is going to be very deserving of some Coach of the Year votes. And you've got a 38-year-old quarterback who has been there and done that. And I don't want to say like he doesn't, he's not excited or anything like that, like, oh, this is no big deal. Of course it's a big deal. But I've always said at the quarterback position, and this is we were just talking about Baker Mayfield. I love Baker. Part of the reason I love Baker is because he reminds me of me and other fans. Like, he gets a first down. We want to charge through the TV. We're high-fiving each other. We want to go tackle somebody. Unfortunately, if you're a quarterback in the NFL, just like a bad play, you've got to be able to flush the good play and calm down. Joe Flacco does that. Baker is still, he's up and down. So having a guy like Joe Flacco that knows, okay, we got to stay focused. We got to put the blinders on, and that's what he does. Now, as far as the run game, mentioned that last week, and not many people talked about this. It was just, oh my God, they didn't run the ball. How much of a concern is this? Keep in mind, the Bears came in ranked second against the run. And I know some people might say, well, the weather wasn't the greatest and what. Well, you know what? The game plan, Kevin Stefanski, Alex Van Pelt, I sound like a hypocrite because, yes, early in the year, I think we did pay more attention to this. What is the game plan? What percentage did they run? What percentage did they throw? But now I think it's whatever you got to do to get the W, and you finally have a guy, and this is huge. Hopefully Deshaun Watson next year healthy is going to be this guy, but right now you have a guy in Joe Flacco starting his 4th consecutive game, which nobody's done this year, and he just exudes that confidence. So if you don't necessarily run the ball down their throats, is it the end of the world? No. Here's Joe Flacco on the run game.
I think people know that we can run the ball, and that's a strength of ours. And so even if it's not something that's operating at its highest level, there's always that threat. So you have to come up and you have to play whatever you're playing honestly, and do what you see as a defense. So that's why you have those.
Bingo. And even when here, I'll even go so far as to say this: it's crazy how far they've come now, and what Joe Flacco gives you. In years past, even with a healthy Nick Chubb, obviously, teams respected the run. They respected the hell out of Nick Chubb. Who wouldn't? But I don't think you feared as much like, oh, my gosh, if it's play action, we could really get burnt here. Now, like, and again, because Flacco sells it so well, but as he said right there, and he's dead on, the Browns always have that threat to run. Is Jerome Ford Nick Chubb? Is Kareem Hunt Nick Chubb? No. And nobody really is in the league. We're all biased there, but that's okay. But can they still run the ball if and when they need to? I think on 3rd and short, 2nd and short, hopefully get away from kind of running to the perimeter all the time. You know that you've got Kareem Hunt back there. You know that you've got Jerome Ford back there. But right now, you've got something special going. You've got a connection that has developed, a relationship that has developed with a guy like David Njoku, who they've been waiting. I mean, there's a reason they paid this guy, right? They paid this guy to be who he is right now as one of the best, one of the most athletic tight ends, playmaking tight ends in the game. And now you've got that quarterback, and now you've got that relationship, that confidence. It's only going to grow. Sometimes, and you hear this, like, well, you can use the pass game as sort of a run game too. Yeah, you can do that. Now, there is no imitator. There is no excuse or whatever for just not running the football. But when it comes to, being able to take what the defense gives you and dumping it off, David Njoku, others making plays after the catch, you've got guys that can do that, and you've got a tight end right now that believes he absolutely can do that. Yes, Bo.
It might be too soon to ask this, but if you're the Browns, do you look into retaining Joe Flacco for next season as a backup?
It's way too early to yeah.
I feel like he's shown, though, that it looks like he has a lot left in the tank, Chico.
Well, you love this. I mean, whether it's Jake Browning, Joe. I mean, would you love to have Joe Flacco? Yes. Does Joe Flacco want to be a backup quarterback? I mean, let's say Joe Flacco, and this is why you have to evaluate at the end of the season. If Joe Flacco, gets them to the playoffs, maybe they win a playoff game. Who knows? Maybe they go farther than that. Why would Joe Flacco all of a sudden just go, yeah, hey, Deshaun, it's your – I mean, yeah, the Browns are paying him, but there's a reason Joe Flacco's a competitor. Just because he doesn't foam at the mouth and yell and scream and stomp around, the guy's a competitor. So, I mean, like the idea of would they like to have, in a perfect world, a healthy Deshaun Watson and a healthy Joe Flacco? Yeah, a lot of teams would. Joe Flacco knows that right now he may have extended, and again, he's 38. So it's not like long-term deals or anything like that are coming, but would the Browns consider paying? I don't know. I mean, who knows? At this point, it is way too early. But
the other thing with that is you already know, Chico, as soon as Deshaun does one bad throw, one errant pass, people are going to start clamoring, put Joe in, bring Joe back. You know it's coming, if that happened.
Yeah. He just I don't even want to think about that right now. And I know that's like,
sorry,
I don't know why you're on such a rampage with like backup quarterbacks turned starter. I don't know if it's like an underdog type, like a Rudy type thing for you, like Jake Browning for
maybe
a starter.
That could be.
Yeah, I mean it is. It's a great story. I don't know if you'd love to have him. Absolutely, I want him back. But again, it takes two, and Joe Flacco could very well come back and say, hey, this is what I did for you guys, so where you might be looking to pay a backup this is what I think I'm worth. So now we decide. But you know what? Who gives a damn about that? It's way down the road. We're getting ready. We're just trying to get to 1-0. Just trying to get to 1-0 as they take on the Texans on Sunday. All right. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, all that good stuff to all of you folks out there. We will be off on Monday, Tuesday, back at it with the Bold Bald Breakdown. Myself, Nick Shook. Bohm will be here as well if he should be here. Bohm, What you got? Any?
No guarantees, Chico. Much like Ryan Day to Kyle McCord's father. No guarantees.
Thank you, Bill. What's is there any? I'm being serious now. With like the Jewish, I know Hanukkah's over, right?
Yes, it was on December 8th and it ended on the 16th.
Okay, so is there anything like on Christmas Day? Is there like the big dinner that you talked about? What?
So it really just depends on the year because the Hebrew calendar lines up differently with like the calendar that we typically use. So some years it does line up with Christmas. It does overlap.
Okay. All right.
But not this year.
Okay.
Yeah, we're all just soaking in your Christmas splendor.
Put on Hanukkah. It's time for Hanukkah. Dustin Hoffmonica celebrates Hanukkah. Adam Sandler song, so good.
Genius.
Yeah, it is genius. All right, we're out of time. Thanks to Dan Lobby, joined us, Cleveland.com and Cleveland Plain Dealer. Also, Sean Pendergast, he was absolutely outstanding. If you missed that interview, it'll be replayed on the iHeart app, also wherever you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify. Pendergast was absolutely outstanding. Thanks to Michael Bohm. Thanks to both those guys, and thanks mostly to all of you. Be safe during the holidays. Have a very Merry Christmas, and we'll talk to you again on Tuesday. Until then, so long, everybody. See you.